is Andreina.
My name is Gabriela, and this is Wigs and Candles, a podcast about two sisters and their obsession with period film.
We want to dig into some of our favorite period films and review them. Find out why we love them and what effect they have on us.
Join us on a trip through palaces and manors, balls and tea parties, and a lot of dresses, carriages, and of course, wigs and candles.
In this episode, Jane Eyre.
Today, we're discussing a classical drama that has been long on our list, Nene.
Yes, finally we're doing a Brontë adaptation. We are discussing Jane Eyre, the one from 2011.
Yes, Nene, we're so excited. And we are not alone.
That's right. We have Adriana as our guest again. Adriana, welcome to our podcast. We're so excited to go through this movie with you.
Hello, thank you for inviting me again.
Adriana, you were a guest during our last season finale, and we had so much fun. We knew we had to have you back for the season finale again. Thank you for being here.
I'm so happy to be here.
And not only are we doing this podcast episode together, for the very first time, we are together in the same place, recording together. This is an extremely exciting thing for us. This is an extremely exciting moment. It's after the pandemic, and we haven't been together, the three of us in the same spot, for 5 years.
Yes, this is a total highlight, not only in the Wigs and Candles series, but also in our lives.
Yes, this is a very special occasion.
Yeah, and because of that, we are, having a little prosecco to help us in our discussion of this movie and, of course, the book and all the themes that go with it. So, Gabi, why don't we start with some facts about the movie?
Sure, Nene, my pleasure. I will take that. So here are some of the facts of the movie. Jane Eyre is a romantic drama. It came out in 2011. It's based on the Charlotte Bronte's novel from 1847 of the same name, which is a classic of the Gothic, Bildungsroman, and Romance genres. It was directed by Cary Fukunaga, a director who is best known for an award-winning film called Sin Nombre, and a television series called True Detective. The film stars Mia Wasikowska as Jane Eyre and Michael Fassbender as Edward Fairfax Rochester. We also see Jamie Bell, who we know from Billy Elliot, and Dame Judi Dench on very important supporting roles. The film was very well acclaimed by critics and also had a good reception at many film festivals. It was not an award-sweeping film, but the performances of both Mia and Michael received a lot of nominations. And maybe just to mention the most emblematic accolade, the film was nominated to the Oscars for the film's costume design done by Michael O'Connor. So this was a summary of the facts. Nene, can you give us a summary of the plot?
Thank you very much for those facts, Gabi. That's really interesting, and I can't wait to talk about it. The summary of the plot is essentially the plot of the novel, because the movie closely follows the novel, the original novel. So I'm going to try to do it as briefly as I can. And there's no spoilers here since this is a novel published in 1847. So Jane Eyre is an orphan growing up with her cruel aunt, Sarah Reed, at Gatehead Hall. She is unloved by her aunt and cousins and is sent to Lowood Institution, a school for orphan girls. Lowood is a terrible place, and there Jane suffers even more cruelty and humiliations. At the school, she befriends and then very quickly loses a friend, Helen, who has a great impact in her life later on. Jane grows up at Lowood anyway and becomes a teacher. She decides to to leave Lowood and takes a job as a governess at Thornfield Hall, a remote, grand old house. There she meets the master of the house, Mr. Rochester. Against all expectation, Mr. Rochester and Jane fall in love, but their love is haunted by Mr. Rochester's past. After a terrible discovery related to this terrible past, Jane leaves and almost dies while walking the moors. She is rescued by a family and starts to heal, but finally feels compelled to go back to Thornfield Hall, where she finds Mr. Rochester maimed from a horrible fire. They reconcile and go on to live a happy and honest life together. So that's the plot of the novel/movie.
Very well. So I think we're all set up to start our discussion.
Great. I can wait.
Then go ahead.
All right. So the first topic that we think is appropriate to touch to start a discussion is just essentially talk about Jane Eyre as a character, Jane Eyre as a romantic heroine. What do you think about Jane Eyre as a romantic heroine? Was Charlotte Brontë ahead of her time with this character of Jane Eyre? She's so modern for the times where the story takes place. What do you think, Adriana?
So I came to this movie without knowing anything about Jane Eyre. I didn't read the novel, and I read the other Charlotte's sister novel, Wuthering Heights. I'm a big fan of Wuthering Heights, but I never read Jane Eyre. So I came to this movie really as a blank slate, ready to absorb this story. And what I was very surprised about, like I didn't know what to expect, but what I was very surprised about is Jane Eyre as a feminist icon. And this kind of blew my mind away because I didn't expect it. I expected a story about, sadness and all of that. And there is a lot of that in there, but Jane Eyre as a character really impressed me because I thought she was an incredible character for the times, where she was coming from, the way she thought about life, and the way she handled all the conflicts in her life was coming from a very feminist background that I didn't expect for a character of that time. So that was my first impression of the movie. Was like, this is an incredible character, and I'm so impressed by Jane Eyre. So I guess we will go deep into this, but to me, the actual movie and story of Jane Eyre, and we can talk about the aspects of the movie, which I think was fantastic, but the actual story of Jane Eyre in the times we're living is incredibly relevant, mm-hmm. And I'm so ready to dig into this character and this movie.
Oh, that's great, Adri. Thank you so much for that. Yeah, we were going to get into a lot of more details, and also how relevant this character is still today in 2022, even though it was created in 1847. It's astonishing. What about you, Gaby?
Well, I was also very impressed by the strength of her character, and I also saw it with our modern glasses of, well, this sounds very feminist for those times. So yes, I would also say she's a very we can call her as a feminist heroine of the time, especially the aspect of her wanting to work. That it was very unusual for women in those days to want to work. Mostly we're looking for a good marriage opportunity. And she was always willing to work. So those things impressed me a lot. So, very strong character, very strong. We have to just be careful how much of our modern feminist glasses we're putting into in interpreting the story. Maybe other thing that it's also interesting this book came out in 1847. So, and we now, when we recollect history and historians go back and analyze the work of the Brontë sisters, of course, they say, okay, this is maybe one of the first feminist figures of literature back then, but we don't know if someone did it before them, you know? These thoughts were in the heads of women for centuries already before them. And it's just so sad that we can say this in 1847, if we mark this book or this story as one of the first ones, only in 1847 such a story came out and was published.
Yeah, no, that's a great observation, Gabi. I think, and there's two things that we have to keep in mind here. It's very dangerous to revision history. It's very dangerous to go back and say, oh, she was a feminist, or put on our modern glasses and look at literature from different periods and say this is feminist. I think throughout history there have been women writing about their rights throughout medieval times. There's always been women, one here and there, that have written astonishing works. However, they have not come to us as easily or readily available as other writings. So women have been thinking about their rights for the entirety of history. But the fact that we have few records of this thought is just the proof of, you know, how the patriarchy has always kind of chosen which stories get told. So I think Jane Eyre is not the first feminist character. George Sand had been writing already for a while. She had been writing in England, and she was writing not feminist characters, but herself was trying to live a different life. And we have different writers and characters in the 19th century who are already fighting for women's rights. But what we can say about Jane Eyre is that she is an astonishingly modern character, and not through our feminist lenses or glass or perspective, but as a moral human being. Her truth comes from a basic understanding of what it means to be a human being, and the equality that Jane searches. The quality that she's after is not as a woman, it's as a human being. And I think this is key to put us in the period. And I think we can see some of the quotes that we kind of picked up from the movie, which is, you know, I think the dialogue is so beautiful because of, you know, it's picked up from the novel. I know, Gabi, you made some notes of some of your favorite quotes that we can look at here. And I think one of the most gorgeous one that you pick, and I loved, is there, you know, we told the plot of the movie, and there's a moment when Jane Eyre decides to leave when she found out this terrible past that Rochester has, and she says, I am a free human being with an independent will, which I now exert to leave you. So I think Jane Eyre is much more than a feminist character. She's a humanist. She's a free human being trying to achieve the highest level of freedom a human being can accomplish. Not as a woman, but as a human being, because the concept of feminism is a bit, of course she makes some, she does make some feminist remarks saying, I wish I could be a person of action like men are. Yeah. I wish I could see beyond the horizon. There's a scene where she's standing at a window, talking to another character saying, this is the limit of what I can see. I wish I, as a woman, could be allowed to see beyond the horizon, to see what else I could accomplish. So yes, there are some remarks about society at the time, you know, the limitations that were placed on women. But I see her more as a
trying to reach like human exaltation. Like, if we have the power of thought and moral among creatures, we have to make the best out of it. So she's trying to reach that.
Yes.
Yeah, and I think modern feminism, like, we can apply it to the novel and to the story, but we have to also put ourselves in 1847 and what Charlotte was going through, because this novel has a lot of parallel with her life. And she was just, the word, maybe the modern words that we apply to feminism maybe didn't exist there, but she knew, intrinsically, I mean, this is not a new concept. She knew as a human being, he was equal, and she wanted to achieve this equality, which is the goal of feminism. So it is interesting, that she was able to write it in such an explicit way, in a way that still resonates with modern feminism, because it is a timeless concept. Feminism is not a modern concept. Maybe the word is, but not the actual concept of we are all human beings. We are all equals. And this is something that, in general, women and minorities and everyone that has not been in a powerful position or a privileged position has felt through history, maybe not in this word. So, to me, just reading this, not reading this novel, but watching this movie, kind of opened my eyes to these concepts being like, this is not a new concept. This is not something like a new feeling. This is something that's been discussed throughout history. And she very eloquently presented it in this novel and, in a very relatable way. And Jane Eyre is obviously her doppelganger, in the novel, like Charlotte's doppelganger. So she's expressing herself through Jane, and about all this. I am an equal, I am an equal person, even though I'm not much. I in spirit, I am your equal. So we will, I guess, discuss all these, some of the, kind of quotes that Jane, says in the movie. Same in the novel, but I was very impressed to see that this concept of feminism and equality expressed in a modern way, like we express it now. This is not new. This has been talked about and expressed way before our times. And then once you go back and explore women's works, which were limited before, you will see that all of this have done and said before in different ways. And this is why I think this novel, this story, Jane Eyre, is so interesting, so relevant to everything that is happening now. So I myself, I'm very excited to discuss how all these thoughts that Jane had, kind of play into, our modern society and how relevant they are.
Yeah, I agree. I think that the genius of the story, because here we're mixing the movie with the novel, and what we have to say about them, because we're talking about the movie. It's a movie. It's a novel. It's an adaptation of a novel. But I think it's a very faithful one that captures the character really, really well. The character really comes across, and the genius of it is how. The honesty of Jane Eyre, the through line, the clearness of thought and action of Jane Eyre comes through in the movie as clearly as it does in the novel. I think she's such an extraordinary character because of the way she's written to be it is a romantic story with a lot of tragedy behind it, but the character of Jane Eyre comes through so clearly, like she shines. Even 100, how many years has it been?
200.
170 years. She shines through, so her voice is so clear, so resonant, so untouched by time. It's just extraordinary that her voice comes through clear and loud, and you can completely see this whole human being. And I think the movie really captured the character really well because, you have a big novel that you have to adapt and you have to choose which pieces of dialogue you keep. And what the movie did, what the screenplay did was really keep the essence of Jane Eyre and show us what this character is, because the book is a first person novel.
Yeah.
And the movie really, really succeeds in showing you in showing you this magnificent character created by Charlotte Brontë. She's not lost in the movie. There's no conflict for me when you see, there's a lot of so-called quote unquote feminist characters that still have, some flaws where you see, oh my God, she's a victim of the patriarchy and so on. Jane Eyre is such an extraordinarily written character. She's never, not 1 ounce, a victim. Even though she's victimized throughout her life, she's abused by her aunt, she's abused by her cousins, she's an orphan, she has no parent. She's sent to a school that was so terrible that little girls died of illness in this little school. However, Jane Eyre survived it all and thrived. Her intellect never suffered.
I think we will talk about the movie. I'm guessing we will talk about the movie and the story, like in a separate way. But the movie itself, I was very impressed with it because I was like, there is no way Jane Eyre said these words. I mean, like, there has to be, they changed this. They made it so it was more adaptable, like more relatable. And then I go back and research the movie itself. And actually, the movie is incredibly faithful to the novel.
Yes.
Nothing is made up. I mean, some things are obviously cut because of the movie, because of the length of the movie. But the essence of the story is exactly the same. It's incredibly faithful. So I was very, very impressed by that all of this came from the novel, and it was it was not adapted in a thinking, we're gonna tell the story in a modern way or anything like that. It was very faithful to its time, very faithful to what the novel wanted to say.
So let's go through some quotes, and then you give me your thoughts on each quote.
Okay.
I'm gonna go for the first one. For the second one, we already mentioned one of our favorites. There's a scene where Mr. Rochester and Jane Eyre are talking under a tree. It's a very romantic scene. The landscape is just breathtaking. And she is actually informing him that she plans to leave the house. And he, of course, doesn't want her to leave Thornfield Hall. And he fears that she will forget him. So she said, of course I will not forget you. And then she says, I have not been trampled on. I have not been petrified. I have not been excluded from every glimpse of what is bright. This is just pure poetry. Come on.
Well, she's talking about, when she says this, she mentions, I have lived a full life in Thornfield Hall. Mm-hmm. And so she is saying to him, I am not living because I've been mistreated or anything. I have lived a full life here. I have not been trampled on. I have not been petrified. I have not been excluded. So she has been happy at Thornfield Hall. She has not been unhappy. She is living because of her own free will, because her decision to leave has nothing to do with the life she's lived in Thornfield Hall, but because of her feelings for Rochester, and obviously the conflict of she's thinking he's gonna marry someone else. So I think this quote is incredible.
It's incredible. Also knowing where she comes from, how thankful, and she is so aware of what she experienced in this house. She comes from she has had such a tough, cruel childhood, and still she cherishes the beauty of life. And she is so thankful for all this that she lived in this house. And the last bit, I have not been excluded from every glimpse of what is bright. She cherishes that. She knows that she's in a beautiful phase of her life.
Yeah. And even though she's into that, she cherished this for the first time. She's living a full life at Thornfield Hall with caring people that cares about her. She's willing to leave because of her conviction.
Correct. That's what I wanted to add.
Yeah, no, and I think this is an incredible quote because she's defining herself by what she has not experienced. She's defining what is right by saying what she has not experienced at Thornfield Hall. Throughout her life, both at the school and with her aunt, she was humiliated, beaten up, diminished, punished, etc. And all along, even as a little child, and even the little child actress they had was so perfect. She was perfect. What a great performance, because you can see
she was gorgeous.
the right.
Where is she?
You can see the right.
Where is she now?
Yeah, what a wonderful performance, because you can see that is the through line for Jane Eyre is that she knows what a human being deserves. She knows what is right from a very early age. And the fact that she has not been trampled on or petrified and not been excluded from every glimpse of what is bright defines what she thinks humans should have a right to, and women and men equally. You should have respect. You should be considered an equal. You should live a life that is dignified and honest and with beauty around you and with possibilities for life. And when she's saying, I have not been excluded from every glimpse of what is bright, which is such an extraordinary line that this woman wrote. Oh my God. It shows you that this is the desire that every human being, and I'm being very clear not saying woman, because I think this is the perspective that she's having, that women are human beings too, that have a right for possibility, for imagination, for dreams, for seeing themselves as higher than what society might say, or your circumstances, or the people around you. And she experienced all of this at Thornfield Hall, which is a very important moment in Jane Eyre's life, which she said, this is possible. Despite everything I have suffered, it is possible.
Well, that's the thing. That's the beauty about Jane Eyre as a character, is that even though she had a terrible childhood, her aunt mistreated her and abused her. Her cousins were really bullying her. Then she goes to her school, and then she experienced terrible things there. Even though she went through that, she has not lost her spirit.
Yes.
She still has hopefulness, and then she can experience happiness, and she knows she deserves it, and it doesn't taint her life. She can put that as a young woman at the time. She's mature enough to say, I've gone through this, and she's not still cynical to say,
totally.
To say I'm bitter and I'm going to be a bitter life because of this. She can still be grateful for the good things she experienced at Thornfield.
And also, Adriana, how I see it, looking into because she's seeking spiritual greatness,
that is a great word, spiritual greatness.
She is not willing to feel bitterness, because she knows bitterness and hate and regret is an undesirable feeling. It's an ungraceful feeling. So she doesn't want to lower herself to feel hate or
absolutely.
And I think she knows, because like her aunt was very bitter, and that's where she came from, and it was so mad at her for different reasons, and that's why. So in her young age, she was able to distinguish. Say, I choose not to do this as a person. Like, I choose not to be bitter about all the bad things that happened to me. I choose to be grateful for the things that I'm experiencing here, and I still choose to do my own. I have my own will, and my own will tells me I need to get away from you, because this is not okay what you are proposing to me. So it in a way, she has more clarity than most of us at an old age. And this is why, obviously, this novel is so very relevant. It kind of caused this such a big impression that we're still talking about it after so long.
And going through this rejection of bitterness, she meets her aunt at a later stage, The aunt is very sick, and she still wants to see Jane Eyre, maybe just to ruin her life, just to want to ruin her life one more time before she dies. Something really, really low feeling, you know?
Yeah.
And Jane Eyre still has this dignity of not falling onto the aunt's level, of feeling hate, regret, bitterness, whatever. She even says, I would have loved you if you'd let me. So even though the aunt
She
is
tells
being
that
mean
to the
her,
aunt.
to the
To the
aunt,
aunt,
yeah.
even though the aunt is being mean to her in that moment, she still says, I would have loved you if you let me. And I forgive you completely. I am at peace with you.
No, and her relationship with her aunt, because she goes back, her aunt is dying, so she goes back and talks to her, and the aunt is like, you know, I lied to you. I told your uncle that you died, and she's absorbing this information, and she could have been very spiteful. She could have been like, and then she was not like, oh my gosh, I forgive you, blah, blah, blah. So you don't ever feel Jane is a weak character.
No.
She is not a
Ever.
victim.
It was a decision.
Ever. You never feel like Jane was like, you are like, oh my gosh, she's so silly, like going back and being manipulated by her aunt. She's not at all. She says like, you know, I want nothing to do with you. I would have loved you. You had let me. You were wrong. I did nothing wrong. And I am very clear about that. And she leaves without any regrets. And actually, Jane, and we can talk about Jane as a moral character, not so much as a feminist character, but as a moral character.
Yes.
We can talk a lot about her and her strength. Her moral strength is just incredible.
Yes.
Because to be confronted with a person that did so much bad things to you and had that kind of response, non-bitter, but also not weak in saying, this is how it was. I was a child. You abused me, and I would have loved you, but you didn't let me. And she walked out of there with a clear conscience,
And
I
completely
think.
dignified.
Absolutely.
And there was one thing that the actress Mia Wasikowska said in an interview about her performance and the character, Jane Eyre, where she says Jane doesn't compromise herself for anybody. And this is exactly this moral torch that guides Jane in all her decisions and in all her doing. She is not going to compromise her soul, her spirit, because her aunt is so deceitful. She says, you know, I decide for myself. I choose for myself not to hate you. And this is actually, for me, the best revenge that she could ever do to the aunt.
Yeah, the aunt really is
She was
really
expecting
painful. Yeah, it's
for
so
Jane Eyre to blow up or whatever.
Exactly.
And she was so cool. And she
Yeah.
said,
I think
I
what?
think we
I'm done
can.
with
I
you.
think we can. I don't know when, but I ask for your permission. How can we? When can we talk about Jane's role models? She did have good role models, female role models throughout her story and the movie. We can see it in the movie.
Yeah.
But her female role models, like, let's say Helen, her friend, and they all came from different. The interesting thing is, like, they were all very different to Jane. And like, her friend Helen told her, you know, you're gonna go to hell, but you have to let go. You have to let go of bitterness. You cannot leave, because she was very angry. Like, they were punished at school.
Yeah.
And Jen was like, I will not stand for that. Like, I will not be able to live through that. And and her friend Helen was like, you have to let go of that, because that's not going to take you anywhere good.
Yeah.
And they were kids, but the way Helen said it, you can come at it from the Christian perspective. We can talk about it, but it really resonates in Jane. Like, she was maybe going down that path. I'm like, I'm going out full revenge. I feel so angry that this is happening. It's such an injustice. And her friend was like, it's gonna be better for you to let go of that bitterness.
Wow. Yeah, so it's Helen who teaches her.
So Helen, and I think in the novel, maybe it's probably, you know, spell out more about all of her role models, but we can see it throughout the movie too.
Yes.
Helen, and she had, I don't remember her name.
Miss
Fairfax.
Fairfax.
Miss Fairfax.
The housekeeper.
The housekeeper. And we can talk about that character because I thought it was an incredible character that actually to me, it was unexpected. I didn't expect a lot of things that happened
Yes.
From Miss Fairfax. So a lot of female characters, female influence kind of shaped how Jane learned about how to deal with life and how to deal with like all the unfortunate things that happen.
Absolutely. Yeah, I think that's a very important point because Jane Eyre has like 3 movements. It's the childhood, Thornfield Hall. When she escapes, can we say why she escapes Thornfield Hall?
Well, she runs away from.
She runs away from Thornfield Hall when she finds out that Mr. Rochester, who has proposed to her, they have fallen in love. In fact, Mr. Rochester had been married in the past and his wife was ill, mentally ill, and he had this previous wife literally hidden in a closet or of some sort at Thornfield Hall. So he had ghosts in the closet. That
We're going to talk about Mr. Rochester.
Oh, we're going to talk about Mr. Rochester.
I'm waiting for that.
So there's like 3 different movements. She has the childhood at law. Well, no, there's like 4 movements. Her aunt's a terrible female role model. Then she goes to the school and she has terrible female and male role models, but then she has a beautiful friend who really changes her perspective, which is Helen. Then she goes to Thornfield Hall and she has Mr. Rochester, which is an enigma. It's a very strange character. But we also have the housekeeper, Miss Fairfax, played by Dame Judi Dench. And the reason Adriana says this character is surprising is because you think she's going to be some evil character that's going to really continue this cliche evil lady. The cycle of abuse. And it's not true. It is the opposite. Miss Fairfax is a kind older lady, and she's very gentle and kind to Jane Eyre. She's really like
tries to protect
her.
Jane.
I think what is incredible about this story is that you have real human beings here. You don't have evil characters that are just so evil that you don't relate to them or understand them, or you have such good characters that you think these people are, there's no real people like this. These are real human beings with moral through lines and thoughts and ways of beings. And Miss Fairfax is one of those. And then you have, when Jane Eyre escapes, she runs away and she almost dies. And she's found by these sisters. There's 2 sisters who find her and bring them to their house, to their brother. And these are a Christian family, very good family, and they welcome her. So Jane Eyre is able to, that's like the 3rd movement, and Jane Eyre is able to experience kindness and support from good people on earth. So that's why Jane Eyre understands what is good and bad, because she has experienced both. Well, she and especially from I think
another thing that kind of really impressed me about the movie and the story is that all the characters are very 3-dimensional. And
yes.
None of the characters are bad characters. They are bad characters that inflict pain onto Jane, and are good characters, but none of the characters feel fake. And one thing about fiction and Jane Eyre at the end, it is fiction, even though it's based kind of loosely on Charlotte's life. Jane, there is one thing about fiction, and that is called a Mary Jane. And I don't know if you guys know about this concept.
Can you explain this concept to us,
please? I will explain it to you, a Mary Jane. What is a Mary Jane? A Mary Jane is a character that is perfect.
Oh,
it's a character that has no flaws. It's a character that everybody loves in a story. So everybody loves a Mary Jane. No matter what Mary does, no matter what she does, what she's doing, there is no consequences to her acts. She is perfect. She is beautiful. Everybody loves her. So when you are creating a story from fiction, if you are writing fiction and you create a character that it is like this, you are creating a Mary Jane character. And the thing about this is like nobody can relate to Mary Jane because she is perfect.
Yeah.
Nobody hates her.
Can I say a modern Mary Jane?
There are many Mary Jane.
Emily in Paris.
Exactly. So in fiction, in writing fiction, you will find many Mary Janes. And I can give you a million examples. Andreina gave you one, Emily in Paris. I'm going to give you another one. This is a very popular show, which is, I forget about the show. What is the name? The Incredible
Mrs. Marvel.
Mrs. Marvel, Mrs. Maisel.
The Grand Miss Maple, yeah.
Mrs. Maisel, which is written by, and I love to say that because it is written by same writers as Gilmore Girls, which is one of my favorite shows. The Marvelous Mrs. Maisel, that's another Mary Jane character. She falls into that, and in another podcast maybe we can talk about it. So you can fall into this so easily, and there are so many examples of writing fiction and writing Mary Jane characters. There is a male name for
there's a male equivalent
to Mary Jane, which is I think Kevin Sue or something. It's very funny. I don't remember right now, but it's Stu something. Anyways, sorry about our listeners, but the Mary Jane characters this is a very common, popular name for a character that is so perfect that you cannot relate to it. And what I was gonna say, and it's relevant to the story, is like Jane Eyre is so not a Mary Jane, and it was so impressive, and this is why this novel it is what it is, that Charlotte Brontë was able to write a character that has such strict moral standards, so that she will never deviate. But Jane as a character is very relatable, and she has flaws in the way that she feels anger. She feels like she wants to take on revenge on her teachers and her aunt. She's a human character.
Yep.
Her characteristics are so human, but still she was very strongly guided by her Christian and her moral values, which is what she goes through life. So she's a very impressive woman, but she's not a Mary Jane. And that was a very impressive accomplishment of this novel, because if you read fiction, if you watch TV shows, if you enjoy any fictional story, you will find all these characters everywhere. And this is a mistake that authors make all the time.
Yeah. That is thank you so much for that. I really, really, really love that. And I think it's really, really relevant. And the last thing, because we do need to move on to the other questions and topics we have about the movie, is that one of the sins of period films and adaptations and historical inspired movies and so on, we can talk about Bridgerton, is that in the quest to make characters relevant, in the quest to make the period relevant, writers, and here let's stick with TV and movies, writers will shape and mold the characters and the time to the point that they become anachronistic, and to the point that they're not saying anything about the period anymore. And I think one of the great aspects of this movie, of this adaptation, is that they didn't need to modernize Jane Eyre in any way. I think one of the things that really bothers me is when they try to modernize characters so they appeal to modern audiences, which for me
happens in Bridgerton.
It is very disrespectful of audiences, as if you cannot relate to a character from a different time. And I think, if you go on YouTube, you can find a few period film critics and especially costume historians that have videos on YouTube. There's lots of them, excellent ones, and they touch on very, very relevant topics. And there's the trope of the proto-feminist in period films, a character that is so modern, that is impossible, just to make it relevant to modern audiences. And some examples will be, let's talk about, for example, costumes. Everybody will be wearing the traditional costumes and wearing the traditional hairdos, but she's complaining, "Oh, I do not wear corsets." Like, she was gonna be making opinions about her own time. This is repressive, or I don't wear these hairstyles, and
that are not realistic to the times.
To the times. trying to appear more modern. It's like the modern, like the rebellious girls, and criticizing how women behave in her own time. Whereas you might have somebody like Jane Eyre, who by every definition is an extremely traditional woman. You can, she wears the hair as the period, her clothes, absolutely everything. She's a woman of her time, but that does not mean that her thoughts and her ideas are not intrinsically modern and universal and timeless. And I think this movie, the adaptation, really, really, is period perfect. This movie is period perfect, yes. And her behavior is period appropriate.
Yeah.
Which goes to show that the ideas are universal and timeless. And I love this about this movie. She's not like some sassy, speaking heroine. No, she's very much of her time.
She's very sassy.
But in a very
period appropriate way, and I love this. But
I hope we talked about the first time Mr. Rochester and Jane Eyre
sit
down and talk, because
exactly. I guess that we can move on this.
Can we move on to this?
Because I think what makes this film so special is, of course, the screenplay, which is gorgeous. I think we've stated that.
It's a fantastic
adaptation. We are clear on that. And who brings it to the screen on such a believable way? Mia Wasikowska and Michael Fassbender. So I think we can start with Mia. Let's start with Mia.
So shall we move on to discussing this cast?
Let's discuss the cast and their performances. Perfect. Mia Wasikowska was 19 years old when she made this film.
Oh my God.
19 years old. And the character...
Same age as Jane.
Exactly. Because the director... or the entire production team they were looking for an actress as close to Jane Eyre's real age in the story as possible.
Wow.
Not to make her more grown up. So Mia Wasikowska, we can say that she is an extremely mature actress on this film.
She's a fantastic, talented actress.
Was spotless. I mean, it was like...
Perfection.
So, if I may do so, I'm going to tell you one of my favorite scenes that portray Mia Wasikowska's performance. And just linking to what we've spoken just before about her moral standards,
which are very high.
There's a scene where they first meet. Well, there's two scenes. We might just go through it later on again. There's two scenes that I really loved about Jane/Mia. The first meeting with Mrs. Rochester in the house, they have met already in the woods, but they don't know of each other. She doesn't know that he is Mr. Rochester, and he doesn't know that he is his governess. Mm-hmm. So they meet in the house, and he calls for her, and she sits with him at the fireplace, and they start talking. And then he says something really arrogant and masculine.
Are you even surprised?
Exactly. And he says, "Don't you find me handsome?" Something along the lines. Mm-hmm. "Don't you find me handsome?" And she says, "Beauty is of little consequence." Like saying, I am looking beyond looks.
And she's saying, "I do find you handsome," but that is not very relevant to this conversation.
So I love that.
Yeah, the reason it is because she's looking at him, that the actress, Mia Wasikowska, her look is extremely deep and intense. She's what a face. And she's looking at him, and he says, "Why are you looking at me this way? Yeah. Do you find me handsome?"
Do you find me handsome? Yes.
And then she responds.
And then she says that. And the way she just sits there so grandly. Mm-hmm. She's not even twinkling with her eyes. Mm-mm. And she says that in such a sovereign way that it impressed me a lot.
Should we speculate what sign in the horoscope is Jane?
Oh my God!
Yes, please. She was on face by this guy.
But
She
she
sat
made a
there.
amazing
I mean, she was
poker
flustered. I mean, she was flustered a little bit by
Obviously.
Mr. Rochester.
I mean, yeah, okay.
but seriously.
Can we make a pause? I mean, Mr. Rochester is played by Michael Fassbender.
Well, we
so
do have to
poor,
make that point.
Poor Jane. I mean, we do have to make that point. I mean, I mean, nobody
can
cannot
be blamed of not being
flustered by Michael
So
Fassbender.
this is the thing. She is making
Yeah.
an extremely good poker face in that moment.
Well,
because
she is at the same time she is being very transparent, and
She
that's the
is,
thing about
totally.
Jane. She is never covering what she thinks. She's telling him as it is, and she is telling him what she thinks. She is telling him, "I do find you handsome, and I am a bit flustered." I'm like, it's not like you don't have an effect on me, but for this conversation,
It has no
it is
consequence.
not relevant. This has no consequence because I'm the governor. You are the owner of this house. So this is not relevant. What if I find you handsome or not? So she's not even
Gorgeous.
denying,
Like, obviously, she's not even denying.
And who, I mean, like, would you? I mean, but she, in her strength, and this is the amazing thing about Jane, is that she's able to collect herself.
Uh-huh.
She obviously is affected by Mr. Rochester.
Yes.
And as Michael Fassbender, we can talk about him. She was a fantastic Mr. Rochester, but we can talk about him. And Mia Wasikowska, what's like, her face is so expressive. And you can tell she's flustered, but she is trying to calm herself down, and she's trying to be true to herself, which is Jane's, final characteristic, which is, it makes her special.
Yeah.
Exactly. So what's your thoughts on Mia?
Mia was perfect.
do we have
Perfect.
any doubt?
Yeah. I always, we have said this in our podcast before. At least I have said it, not Gaby, Adriana. I think casting for me is such a mysterious art.
It is.
What a difficult art it is. And
Yeah, casting directors are like,
casting directors
these
are like
magical people.
Yeah,
that can
like
tell
magicians.
what to
And
do.
I think this was magical casting, because Mia Wasikowska is perfect. She was 19, but she has this moral compass that is so powerful, that like her dignity is so present, so strong throughout. And I even think in that conversation, that initial conversation, there's a moment where she said, I think this conversation is out of my depth. And she admits that, I'm out of my depth in the conversation, but she never loses her dignity and her, the way that she conducts herself.
She's just being very honest.
Very honest.
She has, in her whole conversation with Mr. Rochester, doesn't matter how she's feeling. She is feeling flustered. She's feeling affected by Mr. Rochester. But she never loses her honesty. She always answers honestly of what she's thinking.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think it's, the actress, the character is a perfect combination of the two.
Mm-hmm.
I forgot what I was going to say. First of all, she's never a victim. She's never weak. Okay. She's completely honest, but she's never harsh, offensive. She's never, like, I can think of a character like, and people who love period film will know this character, the character of Claire in Outlander.
Mm-hmm.
I get so frustrated. She has, evolve and change, like mature, like great characters do. But in the first season, I was so frustrated with her because of her big mouth. She was always, she was right in being angry. She was right in being, frustrated by situations. And she was very right for being angry all the time. For sure. She was in 18th century Scotland being abused left and right. But her big mouth, she would lose her composure so many times, and that did not help her at all. And I think it was not realistic, because she could have been killed like numerous times for her big mouth.
She was only lucky that she was a fictional character.
She was only lucky that she was a fictional character and survived every one of these situations. But Jane Eyre is such a perfect character that you can see the fury inside of her. But she is so strong. She's never, like, the thing is, like, she's never, because it can be too much. You can be pretentious in your rifleness.
Yes.
Like, there's some characters that are so despicable just because they're so what's the word? Rifle?
Rifle.
I think never. She's just such a dignified, intense intelligent character, and
I
the
think-
way
I
she's
think,
portrayed by
Gaby,
Mia.
you will agree, right? Like Mia, the way she portrayed exactly in this scene, so many emotions Jane was going through. Like she was very. I feel like even aroused by this character, right? She
Yes.
was very intrigued by Mr. Rochester. She was affected by him
Completely.
but she was still being very honest with him without falling into
Because
you
she
know any
never-
pitfall of like
Yes.
I'm gonna follow your little manipulation that
She's
you're telling
never-
me. You know, what do you think, Gabby?
Never
it
a
was-
victim. Never a victim.
Of course.
What do you think?
Because
But
he was
if-
completely flirting with
I mean,
her. And
seriously, if you guys are in front of Michael Fassbender
I would
telling
be
you all these
speechless.
things, I mean, seriously, what would your reaction be as a 19-year-old?
I would giggle and be speechless. And she was
me
not.
too. I will giggle. I would have been
I
lost
would
my
I
mind.
would not be at the right state of mind to
And she
answer
was
so
so
clearly.
Eloquent.
And she was,
so
and
clear.
then Mia, I think she was very, her face, her as an actor, her skills as an actor allow us to see all these feelings in her face.
Amazing for a 19-year-old.
Brilliant,
So,
brilliant.
I think we can give just straight A's to Mia.
100%.
As Jane
100%.
Best
as
Jane Eyre
Eyre.
ever.
Okay, we have talked about Mia Wasikowska's performance as Jane Eyre, and we have concluded that she was truly brilliant. That was an extraordinary performance, even though there's been many Jane Eyres before. But now, why don't we move on really quickly to Michael Fassbender as Mr. Rochester? Michael Fassbender is such a multifaceted actor. He's been in so many movies. What do we think about his take on Mr. Rochester, such a classic romantic character?
Adriana, you go first.
Oh, I go first. Okay. I was actually very impressed about the character of Rochester and about Michael Fassbender as a performer. I think Michael Fassbender, he's a very impressive actor, and I think I've watched Michael Fassbender in many movies. And actually, there is a movie called Hunger. Is it Hunger?
Yes.
And it's a movie that has nothing to do with this. I mean, like a totally different character. But that movie is made by his performance. So I think he's a very skillful actor. And I was very impressed with him as Mr. Rochester. And I think he was very restrained in a way because he's usually playing these characters that are very mysterious, or I will say magnetic. And, he commands the scene. And the way he played Mr. Rochester, he was so different from all the other cast. So I could see Mr. Rochester instead of Michael Fassbender, which I could not say about many actors right now. Like, if I see Matt Damon or Ben Affleck,
Jesus.
they are
Then you
terrible
only
actors.
see Matt
Then
Damon
you could
or
only
Ben
see
Affleck.
them. But in Michael Fassbender, even though he's a very famous actor, he's very magnetic, he has all these characteristics, I could just forget he's Michael Fassbender and see him as Mr. Rochester. And I think the very first thing is when Jane and him are in the woods, and he's they have this mishap where he falls off the horse, and I still wasn't really convinced. But when he sits down and Jane sits down, and this is the first conversation Jane and him has, I was right away captivated by him as Mr. Rochester, being so fascinated by Jane. And I could see in his face, in the way he was talking, in the way he was trying to really find out who is this girl, where is she coming from, why am I finding this girl so intriguing, and I'm affected by this girl somehow, that she seems so plain, but at the same time I'm affected. And he was very, very good at capturing this essence of Mr. Rochester. And even Mr. Rochester, which I find a lot of faults in this character, I don't find this character very likable. I still don't understand why Jane fell in love with him, and we can talk about it later.
Yeah.
But he was able to bring up all his feeling, all the struggle he had inside, and I have to say, him as an actor, and I have not many actors that I'm a fan of, But Michael Fassbender, I think, is one of the exceptions. He's kind of like a good guy, but something's going to happen. And I could see all the shades. So Michael Fassbender, as an actor, was able to create a three-dimensional character out of Mr. Rochester that I could feel angry about for things he did, but I could also kind of understand where he's coming from.
Yeah. Do you want to go next, Gabi?
Yes.
Oh my God.
She's
it.
ready.
I have to out myself.
Oh my gosh.
Because I haven't seen many of, maybe not one of Michael Fassbender's.
What?
What? He's in X-Men.
You are missing in life, Gabi.
She's in the X-Men.
Okay, I just said I
She
am
outed.
outing.
She's being very honest. Okay, got it.
Like Jane Eyre. Okay.
Go. Is this the first movie you've seen him?
Maybe.
You are in the path of.
But that's
I'm very selective.
That's
so
okay.
it's
So you are coming without any
completely
prejudice.
unbiased, and I was completely taken by his performance. Of course, his looks. He has a very present face. He has a unique face. It is a face that it doesn't blur in the masses.
Oh, yeah.
So he has a very present face, and so. Obviously, this first impression of a person is left by his face. It's very expressive. Also, I think, as you said, Nene, the casting team for this, they made magic by casting Mia and Mr. Rochester because they make or break the film. So
Yeah, I think the chemistry was
perfect.
a big deal.
And we know that he was way older than Mia Wasikowska. If we know that she was 19 and he was like, I don't know.
In his 30s, but
in his 30s.
It's faithful to
It's
his
faithful
character
to
too.
the star. So, knowing that, I was very impressed. And also, I bought every line he said. He brought this character so perfectly to life, so authentically, that you could see all the struggles. You could follow the transformation of Mr. Rochester. I'm sorry. I just googled some photos of Michael Fassbender in black and white. I'm sorry,
I
Gabi.
to look up filmography, not pictures.
I'm sorry, I click on images.
Go back.
Come on. You could follow the transformation of Mr. Rochester perfectly throughout the film. Which transformation? In the first meeting you mentioned, Adriana, where they meet in the woods, he's very rough. He is harsh. He says to her, because she's just a girl in the woods, get me the horse. Get me the horse.
She's very impatient.
He's very impatient, arrogant, and he knows of his position, and he uses that.
Yeah, his privilege as is given
he
to
uses
him.
his power.
Yeah.
So, and you know that. And immediately, when he sees that Jane Eyre is not reacting to that command, like, get me the horse, he lowers his tone and says, can you please help me to come to the horse? And this transformation, he goes all along the film, that he
In
softens.
only one scene, she could see that.
Yeah, and he softens all along the way. So this is, of course, a transformation of the character of Mrs. Rochester, of being an arrogant, privileged
White man.
male.
Has to be said.
Has to be said. But you follow the transformation until he is at the end of this drama. He's kneeling in front of her.
Yeah.
Just a human man, just longing for love, which he has been deprived of. And you know what? I enjoy this little bit as a woman, seeing Mr. Rochester being the one, who was forced to marry someone he didn't love, because this is not a situation that you often see in stories.
Well,
And I was so happy that this is such a nice, because you always see like the woman has to marry.
Oh my goodness.
This was the first, or one of the little times where you see he was forced by his father to marry this woman that he didn't even know and he didn't love.
Oh
and
my God.
I rejoice in the satisfaction of
my
being put in that position.
God, Charlotte
and
Brontë.
it comes to, and Andreina can kind of open up that topic, but it comes to like, are men willing, or are men capable of feeling empathy for something they have not experienced?
Wow, that is a
I'm gonna pose this question. To you.
that is
And
a,
in the
context
in
of
the
the
context
story.
of this story, I mean, obviously he went through this, but are men really capable of feeling empathy for some things that they have not gone through?
Exactly. And this is a transformation that I mentioned, that he comes from that, and he's used to just showing this rough image. But in the inside, he has all this heart full of love. He longs for love. He has
Yes.
empathy.
I
and
think
he
I think
wants-
Mr. Rochester,
yeah.
as a man of this time, was a very empathic, more empathic than normal.
Exactly.
The normal
He was
traditional man.
not a common man.
Yeah.
Because he was used to this convention. He had to marry whatever, right, and be the tough guy. And then Jane Eyre comes and he sees, I am longing for.
Well, he found his equal.
He found his equal.
And he could recognize it.
He even tells a very romantic sentence to Jane Eyre on this moment where they're having under the tree. He says, I feel like there's a limb from my under my ribs connected to you. And if you go a string, and if you go, this communion would snap.
It's gonna snap. I'm gonna bleed.
I'm
out.
gonna bleed out.
And
so
die.
he is showing that so much heart and soul and passion.
He could recognize Jane, and we can talk about relationship between Rochester and Jane as like soulmates finding each other. But he could recognize Jane as his equal.
Yeah.
So this is what I wanted to say.
Wow.
Mr. Rochester was, for me, a wonderful character, and Michael Fassbender was the
was
absolute
the
perfect cast for this character.
Okay,
I have said it.
I would
Wow.
say Mr. Rochester has a lot of faults, but Mr. Michael Fassbender was able to capture all these faults, all this humanness of Mr. Rochester,
and still make him believable as the
Absolutely.
object of love for Jane Eyre.
And this is the beauty of Mr. Rochester, that we've just spoken about it. He has a lot of layers. He is not perfect. He's not a perfect gentleman.
He's not a Kevin Stew.
He's not a Kevin Stew.
I don't remember the name.
it's okay.
Whatever it is.
So he's not a male Mary Jane.
And he's not just like a surface
fantasy.
to project.
He's not a.
He has.
Yes.
He has
He's
feelings.
imperfect.
He's imperfect. Yeah. I'm going to be, yes, thank you, Adriana and Gaby, both for your assessments of this character and how Michael Fassbender portrayed. I have to say that I come to this character with much less objectivity because I do love Michael Fassbender in everything he's done. When I found out that he married Alicia Vikander, I used to have dreams about those two.
Which one?
Michael
Vikander.
Fassbender
okay.
married Alicia Vikander,
Yeah.
and I do love her, and I used to have dreams
Gary's.
thinking about that couple. I have to say that I gave much less thought to Mr. Rochester than both of you did, and I thank you for that because I didn't think. I think the script, the adaptation, really focused on Jane Eyre much more than Mr. Rochester's. For me, he feels more like a supporting character here, much more than a counterpart. And I think what Michael Fassbender did with his incredible intelligence was to fuse this character with all the contradictions and still make him incredibly human, to the point where we get to the very final phase of the relationship where he has to he becomes maimed. He's at the end of the story of Jane Eyre, he's blind, and he has lost. This is a symbol for him losing whatever advantage he had over Jane, and they're truly equal. But in addition to the line that he says to Jane earlier, where he felt like he was tied to her through his ribs, he also said to her, "You are my equal and my likeness." And I think this is the brilliance of this character. This is the romantic male character. There's a million fantasies about it, right? There's a million versions of this fantasy of the perfect man. For Jane Eyre, the perfect counterpart, the fantasy of the perfect man is the one who's gonna be equal to her. And Mr. Rochester is this person who declares, I'm equal to you, you're equal to me, intellectually. And Michael Fassbender very much plays, he's playful. You can see I think in the previous BBC version, their playfulness is shown much more than here. There's, again, because I think he was a little bit underwritten. I see him more as a supporting character than the counterpart for Jane Eyre in this movie in the 2011. And still, he did great with the few lines that he was giving. He's such an unlikable character. He's a terrible, terrible tyrant. However, there's a twinkle in Michael Fassbender's eye that makes him, it's just his eyes.
It's just that he's emotional intelligence.
He's emotional intelligence. And I'm gonna add one last thing about this character / character played by Michael Fassbender that redeems this kind of rude, he's very irascible character. He's always kind of angry, and he says, "I don't like children." He's like a very
she's very mean to us.
But that's just a surface. That's just a surface.
Yeah, exactly. But what I'm going to add is the aspect that redeems Mr. Rochester / played by Michael Fassbender and how he plays him is that he was meant to marry this beautiful society woman, Miss Ingram, and Jen thought that he was going to propose to Miss Ingram, and she was this beautiful, perfectly acceptable woman, like equal in terms of wealth and status and history
in
society. And he gives that up. He says, "I do not care for her. I do not care for her one bit. I do not care for her, not in the least. Never. We never see Mr. Rochester have any interest." It's like there's no contradiction. He never shows any interest whatsoever in Miss Ingram. He chooses to marry Jane Eyre, to propose to her, to live his life with her. And, there's a horrible fire in Thornfield Hall when Jane Eyre leaves, and when she comes back, she decides to come back. She finds him blind. He's been blinded. The house is destroyed. Now they're equal because he has lost whatever gave him an advantage over her, which was his wealth, his money, his house, his beauty. Exactly. And now they're equal. They
were always equals, but in front of society.
Exactly. They were always equal in spirit, but not in society. But once he loses all the material signifiers of his advantages over Jane gains because she inherits a huge sum from her uncle.
No.
She inherits,
amazing.
Yeah, she inherits a fortune. Now they're equal. And this is a fantasy. This is the female fantasy. This is Charlotte Bronte's fantasy. This is Jane Eyre's fantasy.
She's fulfilling this fantasy of like, I'm gonna be equal to this guy somehow. And it is a fantasy because obviously it never happened to her. But this is what has to happen for men and women to feel
equal. And I think what Michael Fassbender gives an incredible depth, emotional intelligence, his magnetism, he's able to take this very contradictable. We're drinking some mimosas here, so you might hear a little drop. So what Michael Fassbender does is this very, very unlikable character, especially for modern audiences, especially for 21st century female audiences. He's an extremely unlikable character. He takes this character and he makes him, first of all, believable, and second of all, you can believe his transformation and likable, and as like a figure that you might, put your dreams onto. You understand Jane Eyre loving such a character.
Yeah. You've said it, if I may say so. The confession scene where he tells Jane Eyre, if I may bring this up at this stage of our discussion, where he confesses Jane Eyre that he has a very dark secret hiding in the closet, that he is indeed married and his wife is in the attic because she is mentally ill and he didn't want to put her in a
mental institution.
Or divorce her.
I think
he had the grounds to divorce her.
No, maybe not. Maybe
because she was we can only speculate, ill, but we can only speculate.
Anyhow, he confesses that to Jane Eyre, and there's the scene where he is kneeling in front of Jane Eyre, begging her to stay and just to forget about this human conventions of marriage and just stay with her, you know? And you see a close-up of Michael Fassbender's face. You are totally in it. You are seeing the pain in his eyes.
Yeah.
He longs for love. He is married, but he has never experienced love.
Oh my
and
God.
you buy the pain in his eyes. He has tears in his eyes, and I completely bought his pain. So this is why, for me, this transformation of Mr. Rochester being arrogant at the very first moment to this moment of kneeling in front of her and just begging her to stay with him, is a perfect, many-dimensional character that we experience in this film.
And I think as Mrs. Rochester, as a character, he's very flawed too. And Mr. Rochester, my sisters, I am very critical of men, and my sisters are like, think about this is, a man of his time. And so I'm trying to think about it that way. And Mr. Rochester is, even though Jane is such an amazing character, Mr. Rochester is very interesting too, in the way that he was able to accept and identify Jane as his equal from the very first encounter. And then also, what I kind of criticize about him is like he wasn't honest with Jane. He wasn't honest about, I have a wife. He wasn't respectful, even though he recognized Jane is my equal mentally, spiritually. He was not able to go beyond that and say, you know what, I'm gonna tell you the truth. I have a wife hidden in the attic and I cannot marry you. So, to me, that's a disrespectful to Jane and to her character. But that's his fault. So that was he paid for it. Yep.
He lost his sight.
He lost everything because
because of it.
His wife burned the whole house. She committed suicide. He lost his sight, and now I'm reading he lost his hand too, which I'm glad. He had it coming. He was not honest with Jane about this. Because always men, I'm sorry I'm getting into this, men always assume I have to solve this on my own. I cannot bring my woman, even though I think she is my equal, I cannot bring her into this conversation because I can do it by myself. This is part of men arrogance, but also part of the way patriarchy works in placing men these roles that are so strict that they are so afraid to get out of.
Yeah, absolutely.
So I do place Mr. Rochester in this context of cannot break through this. I cannot be truthfully honest to this girl, which I consider my equal because of society, standards.
Okay, absolutely. If I may say so. I think we are falling into a modern lens perspective into the film. First. And second, this is, at the end of the day, still a fictional story. So, of course, you wish, with your 2022 woman experience, of course, you wish Mr. Rochester from 1847 would have done the right thing by telling Jane Eyre, hey, I have a wife hidden in the attic. But we have to put ourselves
at that
back
time.
then. And also for the drama of the story. This is again. So we're maybe taking this part a little bit too serious.
Well, I
think
think fiction has to be perfect. Stephen King, one of my favorite authors of the whole time, has always said fiction has to be perfect. Non-fiction can be anything, right? But fiction has to make sense. And she's telling a story. And the final goal of Mr. Rochester losing everything is putting him in the eyes of society the same as Jane, because in their final encounter, Jane is rich. Jane inherited everything that was against her. She was poor. She was plain. She's rich now. She is not poor anymore. And she has lost everything. He's lost his wife, his reputation, his house was burned out,
his health,
his sight, his health, his beauty.
My gosh, his beautiful
his
blue eyes.
beauty is completely, affected. So they are finally meeting as equal in the eyes of society, even though they knew themselves. Yes. Spiritually, they were equals. So this has to be done to tell the story.
Yes.
To tell the story. This is the perfect ending. Jane has gone higher and he's gone lower. So now they are in eyes of society at the same level.
Yeah.
And this is the part of fiction that this is not a true story. This is part of why fiction has to work this way.
Exactly.
Because he has to tell the story.
Exactly. And just so that we can move on to the final discussion, I think in the future we should, we have focused on our podcast. We one of the main goals of our podcast is to talk about women's life in the past and explore women's lives, at least for me, but I think it's a major theme. Exploring the lives of women's that history forgot and that they're portrayed through film. But I think, and we have touched on this, I think when we're talking about Sense and Sensibility, the Jane Austen novel and the adaptation, and also I think A Room with a View, where we're talking about the restrictions that society places both on women and men. And we focus very much on the restrictions that society places on women throughout this podcast. Very much so, because this is our angle, this is where we're interested in. But I think it will be very interesting to focus on the restrictions that society places on men as well. And I think Mr. Rochester is a good example of how the society restriction of a time impacted the actions of men equally as women. They both had to play such narrow roles.
I would say his fall was his cowardice of not being honest with Jane, which is, it's unforgivable in my respect, even in the context of history. It was completely unforgivable. Like, if I was Jane, I will never take this guy back. But I will I am very harsh, and of course, I'm using my own experience to kind of color of this. So
Yes.
Yeah.
But this is my opinion.
What we can say about Mr. Rochester as a character, because we're way beyond the movie here, in this discussion. What we can say about Mr. Rochester, he does pay, and he pays dearly for his mistakes.
Good.
Yeah, and I think this is a way for Jane to show, the universal message of Jane Eyre and Charlotte Brontë is that as humans we must search equality for both
and
both
again,
sexes.
this question about, are men capable of feeling empathy for things they didn't go through? And is Mr. Rochester, and I am being a little bit harsh to Mr. Rochester, because he did want to make Jane his wife. He did want this for them, but he could not bring himself. And this is why Jane's character and Mr. Rochester's character, that differ in the way that Jane, as a moral character, we have never had any doubt on how to act. While Mr. Rochester he fell on the deceit, and he fell on, I need to be not honest 100% to Jane because of what I want. I want to pursue her. I want her. And it is a point where he says, I need to have you for myself.
For my own. Yes.
I need to have you for my own.
And now I get your point, that he's actually just going through just because of his own satisfaction.
Yes.
But not because he's really okay.
I want to bring it back to because we do need to move on. I want to bring it back to the script and how it differs from the novel. And unfortunately, I have read about halfway of the novel, and this is terrible. But what I want to say is that I don't think there's enough Mr. Rochester in Jane Eyre, in this version of Jane Eyre, for us to make that assessment about empathy. I think he's going through the major plot points of the character in this script.
And I'm just going with the character as presented
in the movie. It's okay. So, Nene, I think we have reached the point. I think we have gone thoroughly the main character. So I guess we have to come to the point where you have to make up your mind and decide how many wicks and candles do you give to this film. While you make this assessment, ladies, please consider what you like best, what you didn't like that much, best performances. If you have a favorite scene, please bring it on. And if you want to include your rating about cinematography, production in general, and all the supporting roles, please be my guest and go ahead. Nene, do you want to start?
I can start. I've been thinking about the rating for this movie for a while, because for me, this movie is a 10. no questions. No question about it. This movie is one of the best. I'm not going to say adaptations because I am not entirely I haven't seen all the Jane Eyre adaptations. But as a movie, this movie is a 10 for me. It's perfect. Cinematography is impeccable. The music is haunting and beautiful. The performances are illuminating and inspired. The direction is so skillful and poetic and just generous and just wonderful. This is an extraordinarily beautiful period film. So my rating for the Wicks and Candles is 10. However, I do need to take one wick and candle to the movie. So my final rating is gonna be 9. And the reason for this is that this movie was directed by Cary Fukunaga. Fukunaga is his last name? Fukunaga. A director that I loved from the very beginning. I went to see Sin Nombre at the movie theater when it came out and I loved it. And then I know of all his accomplishments afterwards. And when I saw this Jane Eyre, I said, Cary Fukunaga's Jane Eyre is my favorite and I will always say his name before it. Cary Fukunaga's Jane Eyre was my favorite forever. However, in recent times, there has been some unfortunate allegations against Cary Fukunaga by a number of women claiming sexual assault, sexual abuse, and a number of other terrible things. So unfortunately, this has tainted my perspective on this movie. I love this movie. I gave it 10 in every respect. Screenwriting, costumes, every level, this movie deserves a 10. However, from now on, every time I talk about this movie and see this movie, I'm going to think about the allegations against Cary Fukunaga, who has come to taint my perspective on this movie because I so admire the decisions and the choices he made while directing this movie. And I will, if I may, mention a couple of favorite things. There's this movie really captures really well the gothic aspects of the novel. There's a darkness in the cinematography captures the moors, how dangerous they are, how quiet, how isolated. The house is a grand old house from the 16th century. Everything is captured to perfection. Costumes are impeccable. And it's very dark because Jane Eyre's life up to the moment she meets Rochester has been quite difficult. But finally, when Mr. Rochester declares his love to her, they do have a brief period of happiness before she discovers the terrible discovery she makes. And these scenes are shot with such poetry and beauty that they are extremely moving. Beautiful, what is the word? Sunrise and sunset, and you can feel this house, you can feel the gardens, you can feel Jane Eyre's lightness in finally feeling love. So those are my favorite scenes. There's like a few, 3, 4 scenes where it's sunny and it's beautiful out and there's like cherry blossoms blooming and she's playing and being playful with Mr. Rochester. These are impeccable. Those are my favorite scenes. So my final rating is 9 because unfortunately Cary Fukunaga came to disappoint as so many other directors have done in recent times, sadly.
Adriana, your turn.
I think this movie, and even I'm coming from a perspective, but I cannot compare this movie with the novel. I came to this movie not knowing anything about the story. I am a huge fan of Emily Bronte's Wuthering Heights. I've seen a bunch of adaptations of that, but I have never really dig into Jane Eyre. So I came to this movie not knowing anything about the story, not knowing anything about the novel, and I was blown away. I can truly say this is one of my favorite movies ever, and I will go even as the whole movie itself is very concisely made. The story is told in a very efficient way. This is a movie that is not too long or too short, which it's my pet peeve of mine. I hate movies that are too long, that are indulgent. And it is not an indulgent movie. It was told from the perspective, I'm going to tell this story in the best way it can be told. And then, it let their actors shine, especially Mia Wasikova. She was amazing in this movie. She's an amazing actor, but in this movie, she really shined as Jane Eyre. She really brought up all Jane Eyre characteristics. And Michael Fassbender, even though he's a famous actor, he could be very indulgent himself. He put away his, whatever status, whatever he felt, whatever privilege he had, and brought in a very honest way, Mr. Rochester to life. And I appreciate that from both actors, because actors can be too full of themselves, and then at that point you fail to see the character, you just only see the actor. This didn't happen in this movie. And I have to mention Dame Judi Dench as Miss Fairfax, which was also a very impressive character. We didn't talk about her, but she was an impressive character in the way that I didn't expect her to be so protective of Jane. And I want to bring a special mention to Jamie Bell, which is a very interesting character actor himself. I've seen him in other movies, and he really breaks through what you expect from an actor. And he portrayed his character, John Rivers, as the perfect creepy character. I mean, like, he was perfect. And I don't know if he was like that in the novel. I cannot tell. But as this creepy character that is like, oh, I'm welcoming you, but I have some secret agenda that I want to marry you. He was the perfect, metaphor for, mother men that are like welcoming you and mentoring female women, mentoring female, employees or anything, just with a secret agenda. And I thought he was a perfect metaphor for that. And Jamie Bell, again, he's an actor that he doesn't play, that if you look him up, he doesn't play like romantic. He's not interested in that. He's interested in playing complex characters. And he played, even though his role was small, he played he brought up really interesting. So I think the casting in this movie, Sally Hawkins as Mrs. Reed. So Sally Hawkins is an amazing actor too. She's been in many movies. Sally Hawkins is awesome. And then she also brought like a small character, like her aunt, Mrs. Reed. She brought him to life. So I think the casting was impeccable in this movie, and everything else was impeccable too, especially letting these two characters, Mr. Rochester and Jane, really shine. And even though the background was so perfect, like Thornfield Hall was perfect, the moors were perfect. She running through the moors were like, it was like perfect. Everything about it, like the moors, like the desolation of the moors, the harshness of the environment, it was so perfectly captured. Like if you would read the novel, but did not kind of override or overcast over the actual performances, which were, to me, masterful, of Michael Fassbender and Mia Wasikova. So I think this movie, coming even from the point of it, like not even seeing this story, nothing about the story, not reading the novel, this movie is a 10 for me. Even though Cary Fukunaga has some background, which is, I have to say, not even surprising. It's obviously a talented actor and a talented director. And he obviously he has many faults, and which I take into account. But as a movie, he was very skillful in letting this movie and not letting his indulgence play into the movie, which is a fault that I find in so many Hollywood films right now. Like the directors, they feel so entitled to do and say whatever they want, that the films are super indulgent and turn me off. This movie was a 10 for me.
Perfect. Thank you. So I'm going to take the last call.
Yeah, Gaby, we really want to know your rating.
I'm also going to give it a 10. I'm also going to give it a 10 for various reasons. Mostly the performances and the script. Absolutely brilliant. Flawless. I have to detach the film from Cary Fukunaga's biography. I have to, because it would be a shame for the creation of this film to let his mistakes taint it. Although this is a discussion for itself.
Well, we
I
cannot
don't think
separate it
exactly.
100%, but-
Exactly, we cannot. This is an issue. You cannot separate the art of the artist usually, but in this case, the film is so perfect. It's so sublime that it would be an injustice for it as a film to let his mistakes cast a shadow on the film. So this is my statement on Cary Fukunaga. I am maybe not gonna follow his career any further because it's gonna have a bitter taste.
Yep.
Forever.
Yep.
Okay. So apart from that, I find it a 10. As Adriana's experience, I was not familiar with Jane Eyre. I was not familiar with Charlotte Bronte's novels. So this was a complete premiere for me, both on the story as well as this is the first version of Jane Eyre that I watched. And it completely swept me. One of there are pivotal moments in the movie that I will always carry with me. The first one is maybe the scene of Jane as a kid, where she is being fooled by her cousin into doing something wrong that she didn't do. And her aunt, asked her mates to punish young Jane into a room that is haunted. And this scene is so moving. It's just so breathtaking. This is a picture that I will always stay imprinted in my... The child actor was amazing. And she, in her desperation of coming out of her room, she bounces her head against the wall and falls onto the floor. This is an unforgettable scene.
Yeah.
In cinematography. I will never forget that.
Yeah, I think the name of the young actress is Amelia Clarkson.
Gorgeous Amelia Clarkson. So this scene left an imprint on me. Because it is one of the things that we have talked about many films in our series, and there are films that just are nice, but they don't leave an imprint on you.
Yeah.
And this film has many scenes that take you and you will never forget them. And that is one of those. And the other scene that I want to also highlight, and it captures the moral compass of Jane and all her spiritual journey, is when Mr. Rochester kneels in front of her, makes his confession, I have a wife, whatever, horrible secret, and she is fighting her feelings because she definitely feels tempted. Of course, she is also deeply in love. She also feels tempted to stare. She is a human, and she feels tempted to do that. But then she gets up and she says, God help me, pushes him away, and leaves the room. Oh my God. Yes. She says, I have to respect myself. God help me. And she pushes him away and she leaves away. This is like, for me, the climax of her attitude, of her moral standards. I'm not going to fall into that. I'm not going to live in a so-called relationship because you want to avoid social conventions. I am going for the full deal. If you cannot offer me, I'm off. And she's leaving. So all in all, this is my two favorite scenes, the ones that impacted me the most. And of course, the entire cinematography is impeccable. I think we have made that clear. And also what you said is not indulgent from the director to kind of, he knows that he's doing something great, but the entire background is really just a background. They let the screenplay and the actors really take the lead and shine and be in the foreground. And just the entire setting is really just supporting, which is exactly the role he has to play.
Can we talk about our favorite quotes from the movie?
Yes, go ahead.
Yeah, of course. Yeah, before we finish. Yeah. Go ahead.
So
Abby.
I think I have to agree with Gaby that the quote that a lot of quotes were amazing, but I must respect myself.
I must respect myself.
My favorite quote. And I was watching it and I was commenting with you guys, and I was like, when she said like, I am tempted to, I do love you. I want to be with you, but I must respect myself. And how many of us had ever said that to ourselves. And then
No, we're
and
weak. Most of us are weak.
Weak,
yeah.
That quote really spoke to me. Like, I feel like I have to tattoo that in my body somewhere,
Yep.
just to remind myself I need to respect myself. I must respect myself, even though I love you. I am so tempted. He was obviously tempted by, he was not above human feelings.
No,
Right?
not at all.
He was completely affected. He loved Mr. Rochester. She wanted to stay human, but her moral compass said, I must respect myself. And this is one of the most amazing things about Jane's character.
And this is why I think this scene is really like kind of pivotal.
So, Gabi, what is your rating?
10.
Oh, you're
I
10.
stay with a 10.
Oh my goodness.
What is
Okay.
your favorite phrase then? In
My
quote?
favorite. Oh, my favorite phrase is wow, the one that Gabi had picked. There's many, and there's many famous ones. I think one of the most beautiful ones and one of the most famous, and I actually watched a compilation of all the versions saying this exact same phrase, and it was quite illuminating. I have to mention the most common one, which is, you think that because I am poor, obscure, plain and little, that I am soulless and heartless. She says that to Mr. Rochester when she's leaving. And I think it is so famous is because Jane Eyre is going to something much more greater than feminist views and so on. She's going for a humanist universal message of, the possibilities that all human beings have within them. And that so many times we diminish others just so that we don't have to face the horrors that they are facing.
Yeah.
You might think that because I am little and obscure and plain, I suffer less. No, I have a whole range of emotions. I have a whole range of desires within me. And I think this powerful, deeply spiritual and philosophical message that Charlotte Brontë put on her novel and was so well represented in this movie is what makes this movie get a 10. And it's all captured in that scene. I think that the message is much deeper, much profound, much greater than any love story. This is about human beings reaching their full potential, which includes, love. And passion.
Yeah, she's not
and
even
happiness.
talking from a female perspective, which is obviously where she's coming from. But she's talking about, just because you think I am, you can put anything in that phrase, right? Just because you see me as a black person, as a Latino person, as a poor person, as a female person, like anything, any
whatever.
minority,
if you put this question
will
today,
fit in.
exactly.
Yeah,
will fit into this quote.
Exactly.
Doesn't mean that I don't have feelings because. And we can go in this really deep into it, like racism and how slaves were looked at. Were like, these are not human. They are not really human. They don't feel. They don't have emotions.
They feel less pain, etc.
Exactly. So this quote is very universal.
These are very universal. Yeah. And I think we need to wrap it up. And what we can say is here we have given it 3 10s with a conditional one, which I deduct 1. It's just not in terms of accomplishment. This movie is perfect. We have 30 Wicks and Candles together here. The only thing is I'm
first
thinking
time we have consensus.
first time. This is the highest rated movie that we have reviewed.
Be clear. The point you made, your statement on Cary Fukunaga's
It's taken. It is taken and it is
but
relevant.
we have to acknowledge this film is not his own. This film is the product of a huge team.
It will taint every other project.
Exactly.
But
this is not only his doing. This is the doing of an entire amazingly talented team.
Yeah,
and we're not going to let his flaws and his mistakes, his action, taint the
But
work of a lot of incredibly talented people.
we won't also fail to acknowledge this happened.
Exactly. I think the Weekend Candle I took back is just because of me. Because for me, for so long, I saw this movie when it came out, 2011. So for that time, for 11 years, I consider this movie one of my favorite ever. And then like I said, I used to say Cary Fukunaga's Jane Eyre is my favorite. I used to say his full first and last name attached to this because I saw it as his creation. So the fact that he has now, all these things have come to light really disappoints me and makes me really sad that one of my favorite works of art, of movies is tainted this way. But the movie itself deserves attention. So we could say that this movie gets 30 wicks and candles.
You can say that a lot about a lot of
art. I can say that about
we can have one podcast just talking about problematic creators.
Obviously,
of art,
my favorite filmmaker of all time is Alfred Hitchcock. And if we go into a dark hole and analyze Alfred Hitchcock and everything he did to get his art made, he will have minus wicks and candles because he pretty much tainted all his work with his actions and how he behaved. So I will say that this is the highest rated movie we have reviewed in Wicks and Candles so far. This is an extraordinary movie adaptation. We highly recommend it. Go check it out. It's on Netflix in North America. It might be on Netflix wherever you're listening on. Just check it out. Highly recommended. So to wrap it up, to close it, what should we say?
Viva Jane Eyre.
I will say Jane Eyre. And we need more women in directing and in film and all of that, saying women's stories. So we should support that. We don't support problematic men. We don't need their perspective. We need more women perspectives. So let's take this movie as it is, as good, but let's support more women projects in the future.
Telling their story. Exactly. Well, anyway, that is all for us today. This is the season finale for our second season. Thank you very much, Adriana, for being here, bringing your perspective. Thank you, Gaby, for putting the questions together and the script together. Thank you so much. And thank you, everybody, for listening.
Yes. Stay tuned. And we wish you a nice
rest of the summer.
Season. Yeah, and I hope I get invited again.
Yeah, I have a little hunch that we might.
But I just hope so. But I'm very, very glad I was invited. I really love this movie, so I love sharing with you my opinion.
Thank you so much.
Thank you so much, Adri, and to everybody who's listening. Thank you so much, and we'll see you soon on season 3. Bye bye.
Bye bye.
Bye bye.
Wicks and Candles is available on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, and Stitcher.
So go ahead and subscribe and follow us on Instagram at Wicks and Candles. Thanks for listening and see you next time.
Wicks and Candles is written, hosted, and produced by Andreina Romero and Gabriela Morken Romero. The image design is by Pamela Rollin. The podcast theme music is the Concerto for Two Violins in D minor by Johann Sebastian Bach.